Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head up to Gothenburg once again, or Göteborg as you would say in Swedish, which as I've told you many a time is the Swedish craft beer capital. There's a hell of a lot of craft beer activity going on up there. But for this review we're going to go to a brewery that you must have seen me review at least 20 different beers from, but this is a style that they're not normally associated with actually, so I'm very curious to see how this one turns out. So for this review we are going to return to Stigbergets Bryggeri once again, and we're having a look at what must be my third or so Imperial Stout from these guys. This one is called the Yanga AM, which is an Imperial Stout coming in at 12% ABV, and this one has had chocolate, cinnamon and vanilla added to the brew. Apparently this beer is a continuation of the Trouble Sleep, which they released back in January, which was another really nice Imperial Stout. And these two beers are named after a song by Fela Kuti, who was a Nigerian singer and a black rights activist as well, and the full name of the song is Trouble Sleep Yanga AM actually, so these two beers are considered as being related to each other. I'm not sure if this particular beer was released before this in other countries, because Stigbergets do export some of their beers and then release them a bit later on in Sweden, so I'm not sure exactly when this beer was released outside of Sweden, but it was released here in October of 2019, so should be a really interesting one. This, like I say, when Stigbergets do have a go at other styles, they tend to do it pretty well, but of course this is a brewery that you would normally associate with New England IPAs and stuff like this. So really curious to see how this beer turns out, and as always I hope you guys enjoy my take on this one. I've been reviewing quite a few Stigbergets beers for you over the last little while. But anyway, as is usual with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Stigbergets before. No doubt there will be some more in the fairly near future. There's all the usual social media. If you want to see more beer reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the home page and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Stigbergets Bryggeri then, on to my brewery notes once again. So as I told you earlier, Stigbergets Bryggeri are based in Gothenburg, Göteborg as you would say in Swedish, and they were founded by Nils Hultkrantz and Richard Simonsson. And this pair basically own two bars that share the one kitchen. This is the Bar Kino and the Hagbjörn's Cafe, which can be found on Linnegatan in the city, and both of those opened up back in 2007. So originally the idea was to brew a few beers that they could sell in the bars, but this led to them kegging the beer and selling it on to other pubs, and eventually to bottling the beers, which began back in November of 2014. The original beers that they were producing were mainly English and German styles, but more recently of course they've become more famous for the American, more hoppy IPA type styles if you like. But the original head brewer here was Ole Andersson, who is also the co-owner of OO Brewing. He's been back there working solely in that company since 2017, and he was replaced for a period of time by Barnaby Struve, who was one of the presidents over at Three Floyds in Munster in Indiana in America. But recently they've also opened up a brewery at Partihallarna in Gothenburg, and they can brew 5,000 litre batches there at a time, and they also have been working on some sour beers as well, which they started releasing at the beginning of 2019. They also started selling their beers in 440ml cans as opposed to 330ml bottles. You will find some of the sours and the higher ABV beers such as this one in these little tall kind of skinny 330ml cans as well, but basically the idea behind this is that it makes their beers a little bit easier to export and things like that, and I think it matches different price markets and stuff too. But they now have a brew team of Ollie Banks, who used to work for Beavertown in London, a very good brewery in their day, and also Lucas Monroyd, who used to work for All In, who are one of the many gypsy breweries that you'll find around Gothenburg. So yeah, a really interesting brewery this one. Like I said, very well known for beers for their New England IPAs. The Narangi of course was brewed under the OO name by Ole Andersson, but then you had the GBG Beer Week, which has been re-released as the New and Improved, the Amazing Haze, and also the Muddle as well actually. Those are the big beers that these guys have become well known for. So if you're interested in New England IPAs, Stigbergets are one of the ones that you really should be interested in if you're interested in the European take on this style. And they're always pumping out new beers actually these days. When they had the change of brew team, there was a little bit of a kind of up and down with them, but if you like, but they seem to have really found the kind of quality in their beers now as well, and I guess it's probably to do with them moving premises and things like that and getting used to new equipment and stuff as well, so bear that in mind with this brewery. But they have really started to put the standard of their beers back up to the level where they were before, in my opinion. But a very good Swedish craft brewery, this one, probably one of the better known Swedish craft breweries these days as well, so bear that in mind when you try some of their beers. I really would recommend that you try the Amazing Haze. It's probably one of the best regarded New England IPAs in Europe these days actually. It's very well thought of, that one, and it's a very, very nice beer. But yeah, that's all you really need to know about Stigbergets Bryggeri for the moment. Again, if you want to learn more, you can check out the brewery website in the description below. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can check out the Rate Beer and Untappd pages if you want to see all the different beers that they've done. So yeah, let's get on to the actual tasting of this beer itself then. So as you can see, there's a nice owl on this one actually. It's a little bit like Hedwig from Harry Potter. I don't know if you would call that a snowy owl. I was never, with biology, that was the reason I didn't like biology was because you had to memorise so many different things. But I think that is a snowy owl there. So I have to compliment them on the artwork, and the gold can that goes with it is pretty cool. Like I mentioned earlier, this one is a 330ml can, and it's an Imperial Stout with chocolate, cinnamon and vanilla, coming in at 12% ABV, and it was released through Stigbergets on the, I don't know if it was on the 1st of October that it was released, but this one was released in October of 2019 through Stigbergets here in Sweden. But yeah, without further ado then, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I'm really curious to see how this beer turns out actually. So a little bit of smoke on the opening, and you can smell some of the lovely kind of coffee and chocolate notes coming out of this as we open up. It was chocolate, vanilla and cinnamon that I believe that they added to this one. As I said, coffee there, but it did almost smell a little bit coffee-ish when you open up. But yeah, chocolate, cinnamon and vanilla. As I've told you many a time on the channel, the Swedes absolutely love cinnamon, and licorice is pretty much a staple part of the Swedish and Scandinavian diet, I guess you could say. But yeah, as you can see, and as you would expect from an Imperial Stout, this one's poured a lovely dark ebony rosewood colour. If I hold it up to the light, there's not even a little kind of Coca-Cola coloured edge to this one. It is full kind of, it is basically a full matte black, if you like, a full ebony kind of rosewood colour thing. There's about a solid 1/3 to half finger of a frothy, quite dark tan head on this one. One or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass there, and a few little ones just heading up towards the bottom of the head. Not too much in the way of visible carbonation with this beer, but you can see a few bubbles just kind of popping up towards the bottom of that head there. But overall, looks pretty nice. Nothing surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance when you consider that it is an Imperial Stout. So yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma then and just see how we get on. That smells good. It really does actually. Yeah, so straight away with this beer, I feel like I'm going to be stating the obvious because it smells kind of as it would say on the can. You've got a lovely sweet vanilla note to this beer. You can smell the chocolate in this as well, and to me, the chocolate has it mainly leans towards the milky side of things, and I think that's because of the vanilla that's been put in here. I'd be curious to know whether it's like vanilla pods or whether they've used, flavour essence or something like that in the beer. I know that that's a big favourite of Omnipollo. They quite like to add flavour essence to their beer, but while they do that, they're also very capable of doing sort of pure brews and things as well, in my experience. But yeah, a lovely sort of milky chocolate quality and vanilla kind of forming the base of this beer. The cinnamon really comes out in this one as well, and it's almost like the cinnamon is just infused into the chocolate actually. You can definitely smell a little bit of a kind of roasty black malt just forming the backbone of this beer. At the same time, there is almost a little bit, the way the cinnamon and the chocolate and vanilla and things and the black malt in there is kind of interacting together, you almost get a little bit of a coffee-ish impression out of this one, although it doesn't quite have some of the complexities that you would normally get from coffee beans. But this beer really does give you that kind of coffee impression in the aroma actually, which is interesting. But yeah, in terms of an Imperial Stout, I would be tempted to say that the malt base in this one comes across as being quite sweet rather than anything else. There's a little bit of a woody undertone to it as well, a little bit of a nutty quality also, but it has a really nice, it really has a very nicely blended, the aroma in this one is just very nicely blended, and I like how it all goes together. Really pretty good actually. But yeah, the woody, the more I smell of this, the more I'm getting the kind of woody notes out of it. And it might be a little bit of a placebo effect, I guess, because of the presence of the the vanilla in there, and of course, and it's oak that you would associate that with. But yeah, a lovely sweet smelling Imperial Stout, this one. In terms of the hoppy side of things, there's a little bit of earthiness there. You can pick up a little bit of grassiness as well. I'm guessing, maybe, I don't know exactly what hops they would have used in this, but Williamette, Bramling's Cross, something like that, because there is a little bit of it's got a light sort of grassy and earthy quality to it, but at the same time you're getting some nice kind of red fruity notes in there as well. Incidentally, when you smell the fruity side of the beer, it's got a little bit of a kind of berryish sharpness in the beginning, like plums, raisins, something like that, but you've also got some figgy blackberry kind of qualities in there as well. So it's really interesting how that whole thing goes together. Actually, I really like how the whole beer really just mixes together. I mean, it's quite a sweet smelling Imperial Stout, this one. There's a little bit of hoppy character there, and the fruits are quite juicy and just a little bit sharp as well, which is quite nice actually. So take a little bit of time and just enjoy the aroma of this beer, because it really has quite a bit going on. The more you smell the fruits, the more juicy they become as well. I'd say there's a little bit of a figgy, blackcurranty, blackberry thing in there, but initially it's got a little bit of sharpness too. But the aroma for this beer definitely gets a big kind of thumbs up from me actually. So yeah, let's have a taste of this one then and see how we go on. This one is the Yanga Wake AM, named after the Fela Kuti song, a Nigerian guy who wrote music and was known for being like a black rights activist and stuff like that. A continuation of the Trouble Sleep Imperial Stout that they released back in January. So let's get stuck in. A 12% Imperial Stout with chocolate, cinnamon and vanilla added to the brew from Stigbergets in Gothenburg here in Sweden. Let's have a try. Slange, skål. That's pretty nice actually. It's interesting this, because at the time that I'm reviewing this for you, Popel's Bryggeri and Evil Twin have just released like another iteration, the cinnamon bun version of the Swedish Fika Biscotti Break, and at the same time, around the same time, you get this beer with the cinnamon in it as well. I don't think that's a coincidence, to be honest. But as an Imperial Stout, this one is pretty nice. I mean, it really does, first impression is that it really does lean towards the cinnamon side of things, so you have to really like cinnamon to to appreciate what's going on here. But yeah, that's nice. I mean, straight away with this beer, if you know Canal Buller cinnamon buns, you can see why the Swedes enjoy, why the Swedes would enjoy this beer. They absolutely love cinnamon and they love licorice. And before I came here, I never was really that into it. It was okay, but since I've come here, I really have got quite a bit more into cinnamon and licorice and things like that. So this is a nice beer, and I can see why the Swedes would quite like this one. And this, I would reckon, out of the two brewers there, this one's maybe the creation of Lucas Monroyd rather than Ollie Banks. But yeah, so let's try and break down the flavour of this one then. What you're going to notice about this beer is that it really is quite smooth. The further you go into the aftertaste, you're going to get more of the roasty black malts pushing their way up in the centre of your palate. It's got the cinnamon flavours are kind of adding to the sort of spicy aspect that this beer has, but it really gets drier the further you go into the aftertaste with it. There are, if you go to the front corners of the palate as well and just move in a little bit, you're going to get those kind of woody undertones to the beer. For me, there's a little bit of brown sugar in this one, but not overly much. I mean, if If you go to the very centre of your palate, you're going to get a little bit of a kind of treacly molasses kind of note. It's quite a dark syrupy brown sugar that you'll get out of this one, and this of course is covering up the alcohol, which is 12% in this, so it is a little bit of a beast, this one. But this is really quite a spicy stout, this one. I saw that on Untappd this one was listed as a pastry stout, which I think is just another name for a sweet stout, to be honest with you. Probably it's kind of to do with these cakey beers that Omnipollo and things have put out in previous, in previous months and years and things like that. But really, this is quite a spicy. It's quite a spicy base that this Imperial Stout has. The chocolate that comes out in this one, it's not immediately obvious. I mean, the chocolate to me takes a bit of a back seat in this beer. You've got a nice kind of high percentage cocoa chocolate. You're talking about 80–90%, but really the cinnamon starts to take the cinnamon and the woody aspects of this beer really start to take hold. But as you move further forward on the palate there's a little bit of a nutty quality. There's also a good bit of there's also a good little bit of vanilla quality in there as well, which is, you would expect that when they've added that in, but the vanilla and the woody qualities kind of mix in together. But really the malt base of this beer is very, very spicy, and you can feel the centre of your palate just drying out the further and further you go into the aftertaste. You've seen how long it was since I took a sip of this beer, but the more you leave it, the more that this beer starts to lean towards that kind of spicy end of the spectrum. But in the beginning, when you take it in, the cinnamon flavours and the chocolate and everything, and the vanilla too, they become quite sweet, but really the centre of your palate just dries out in this one, and it's nice how all these different flavours go together actually. The malt base in this is quite well done. The one thing I would say about this beer is I'm not sure how it would go down with people that are not from Scandinavia, because, like I say, cinnamon and licorice I think are a bit more popular over here than they are in other places throughout Europe. Maybe, Americans have got Cinnabon and things like that, so maybe it's a little bit more popular over there and stuff like that. But I mean, overall, the malt base is quite a powerful one in this and quite spicy, so just be aware of that if you pick up this beer. This one might suit coffee stout lovers as well, actually. If you enjoy a good coffee stout, then this one isn't a million miles away from that. They're saying that it's meant to be a sweet pastry stout, but to me, the way the spice comes out of this is a little bit more along the lines of a coffee, or maybe even a Russian Imperial stout, to be honest with you too. So bear that in mind when you have a look at this one. The malt base isn't overly complex. It has everything that you would expect from it, but it is quite spicy, to be honest with you. So yeah, in terms of the hoppy side of things then, back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness there. I think there might be some English hops in here, to be honest with you. Maybe Kent, don't know if it could be Kent Goldings or Bramling's Cross or something like that. I'm pretty sure, that the earthiness in this is a little bit darker, and that's the real giveaway that you've got English hops at play, because the German earthiness is a bit lighter and slightly sweet, and the Belgian earthiness is a little bit more herbal than that. So I'm pretty sure there's a bit of English hops in here. I don't think the American hops could really give you that. I'd be surprised if, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if there's an American hop in here along with one of the English ones. But yeah, I like how that goes together. But as you come further forward along the sides of the palate, you can feel there's a little bit of a herbal quality in there, which again is a telltale sign of English hops. And then as you reach the front corners of the palate, there's a nice little bit of a floral aromaticity, and you can really feel some of that roasty black malt pushing its way out and kind of aiding the earthiness that this beer has. Round the front curve of the palate though, it's a little bit lighter and more grassy, but at the same time you still get that sort of herbal vibe out of this beer, which is quite interesting. Behind the front curve of the palate, as I always say, that's where you get that little oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters push their way out of the beer, and this one does have a little bit of complexity in that area as well. Yeah, so it's not quite as sharp as the aroma as you might think from the aroma. It's almost, this beer, now that I think about it, some of the flavours you get out of this beer, for those of you watching in England and other places, this beer really almost reminds me a little bit of like a kind of Turkish delight, to be honest with you. It's almost a little bit like that, very kind of spicy, sort of candied flavours, to be honest with you. So that's another interesting point to make about this one. But the sweet side of the beer, when you take this beer in, it comes across and it has a little bit of a raisiny plum sharpness, juiciness to it in the beginning, but the further you go into the aftertaste, it evolves a bit more to be a little bit kind of figgy, but I think it leans more towards like a blackcurranty, blackberry type of flavour, to be honest. So yeah, I really like how that goes together. Is it the best Imperial Stout that I've had from Stigbergets? I'm not sure. It's a nice Imperial Stout. I prefer my Imperial Stouts to be a little bit more, you know, the spice on this one I think is just a little bit powerful. It's nice, and if you like a big cinnamon blast, you are going to enjoy this one. To me, it's a little bit powerful for my taste, and you know, that's just subjectiveness. It's a good beer, don't get me wrong on this, it's a good beer, it's very, very well done, but the spiciness in this is just a little bit sort of powerful for me. Cinnamon, I think, you have to be very careful when you use that in beer, and I think I said the same about the Swedish Fika cinnamon bun version. You know, I think that the cinnamon in that was very, very powerful, and I think if you're going to use cinnamon in a beer, you have to use it kind of conservatively, otherwise it takes over the flavour of the beer, or you've got to ramp the other things up to kind of balance it out a little bit. And I think, in fairness, it isn't. I'm not saying this beer is unbalanced, but I think the cinnamon is quite powerful in this one, and a little bit more powerful than I might have made it if I was brewing it myself. But regardless, it is a good beer, and it's quite a spicy Imperial Stout. This, so I mean, if you're a fan of like coffee stouts and chili stouts and things like this level of spiciness that you have in this beer is kind of akin to that, but you don't have the same hotness in the back of your throat, if that at all makes sense. But it's a nice beer. This one, it's interesting. Not quite what I was expecting, I have to admit, but still a good beer nonetheless. If I remember rightly, the Trouble Sleep was a coffee Imperial Stout. It was a little bit more kind of roasty and toasty and things, whereas this one is actually more spicy. But it's a good beer, this, and if you like cinnamon, you are going to enjoy this one. If you liked the Swedish Fika Imperial Biscotti Cinnamon Bun Break, or whatever it was called, from Popels and Evil Twin, you will quite like this beer as well. In terms of the mouthfeel then, I would say, yeah, quite a full-bodied beer, this one. The midpoint of full-bodied. Carbonation's very smooth. The mouthfeel, it's not the most oily Imperial Stout you're going to come across. It does have a good little bit of wetness to it. In terms of bitterness, I think you're talking somewhere in the region of like 70 IBUs with this beer. It must be somewhere up there. You're getting bitterness from the spicy qualities, the cinnamon, from the roasty black malts, and also a bit from the hoppiness too. All of that's contributing, so it must be at least 70 IBUs, maybe 60, 70 IBUs I think is a fair estimate for this one. The malt base, like I say, it's got a bit of smoothness underneath it, and in fairness, the further you go into the aftertaste, some of the woody undertones and the nutty qualities that this beer has, they do start to sweeten and smoothen the malt base up a little bit, but really this is quite a spicy malt base, this one, with a good bit, it does have a good bit of sweetness in it at the same time, but you've got a nice juicy fruity quality to this one in the aftertaste as well. It starts off a little bit sharp and then it just rounds off to be a little bit more kind of smooth and juicy as well. But I mean, overall, an interesting Imperial Stout, this one. That's the thing is, this thing as well, when Stigbergets do this beer style, they tend to throw up some really interesting stuff, so you have to give them kudos for that. But this is definitely an Imperial Stout that's suited to the Scandinavian taste. I'd be very curious to know how it would go down with people drinking it in other countries. So if you are trying this beer in Italy or Germany or Scotland or wherever, let me know your thoughts on this and how it kind of suits your palate, because I think this is definitely a kind of Scandinavian influenced Imperial Stout, if you like, probably the creation of Lucas Monroyd rather than Ollie Banks, I would reckon. But a lovely beer, this one, interesting to try, a little bit powerful on the cinnamon for me, but still a very good beer nonetheless, and cool to see Stigbergets having a go at some more different styles, putting out some other Imperial Stouts, if you like. I'd love to see them have a go at quite a sweet, you know, a big Imperial milk stout or something like that. That would be an interesting project for them. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one then. This one is the Yanga Wake AM an Imperial Stout at 12% ABV with cinnamon, chocolate and vanilla added to the brew from Stigbergets Bryggeri in Gothenburg here in Sweden. Thank you again for watching my beer reviews. As always, let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Stigbergets Bryggeri as well. Let me know where you're drinking this particular beer as well. I think that would be an interesting point. But thanks again for watching, and I will catch you guys very soon. The Yanga Wake AM Imperial Stout from Stigbergets in Gothenburg here in Sweden. Until the next time, Slange Stout, and I'll catch you guys later. Make sure you check out my social media, and make sure you check out some of these Stigbergets Bryggeri beers. Slange, skål, cheers.